Hi guys, and welcome to Magic. In this video I'm going to show you the latest feature in version 9.4.1, which is basically in Hyper IDE. Let's say I want to create my own microservice module, backend module using Magic. Let's call it foo. Okay, it's a folder. It's inside of modules like this. Now, when I create new files inside of any folder actually in Magic, then Magic will actually guide me as I create new files. For instance, now you see this is the folder I'm within. Now Magic actually suggests template files for me. For instance, if I want to have an endpoint, okay, let's call it endpoint, and let's make sure it resolves to the URL bar inside of the foo module. Okay, create, and then I can, if I want to, I can start editing this file, or I can now actually immediately go to my endpoints and type foo/bar. Here is my endpoint, and by default, the single argument it requires is mandatory, and it simply echoes the argument back as a JSON payload. Now, why is this important? Well, because it might be a little bit difficult to understand the development model in Magic. So this new template feature thing actually allows me to have some help. For instance, if I create a new folder named magic.startup, you see files and folders and their names and their position carries semantic value in Magic. And that is important to understand, and I'm going to guide you a little bit through the semantics of how this actually works in this video. For instance, if I have a folder called magic.startup inside of one of my modules, then every single file inside of that folder will automatically execute as the module is installed. Let me illustrate this by choosing one of my templates now inside of Magic Startup, and let me choose the template that actually creates a slot for me automatically as the application is installed. Here you can see acme.foo.bar. If I just simply create this file, then you see it actually dynamically creates a dynamic slot using the slots.create, and the name of the slot is acme.foo.bar. Now, however, if I now go to my evaluator and I do slots.vocabulary acme and I execute this, then that particular slot doesn't exist. If I now, however, go to my files, let me see, where are they? Here they are. And I open up the foo folder, which contains my magic.startup folder, and I install it. And then I go back to the evaluator and I do slots.vocabulary like this, and I do acme as my filtering condition. You will see now that my slot actually exists. So Magic will automatically execute during startup and or installation every single file that can be found recursively within the folder named magic.startup inside of your main module folder. And in fact, if we install any Bazaar app, or particularly probably, I guess, Babel Mail, which actually installs a couple of dynamic slots into my application, then we can actually see this. Now, when I installed this module, if I now go to eval and I do slots.vocabulary Babel, I execute this, you will see I have two dynamically created slots. Why? Because if I now go to Hyper IDE, I expand modules, I expand Babel Mail, and I expand magic.startup, you will see here it creates one dynamic slot called babelmail.email.send for me, and here it creates another dynamic slot for me called babelmail.template.braid. So this little wizard feature allowing me to, for instance, within the Magic startup folder of my module, kind of like guides me in regards to what I should normally do within this particular folder, actually helps me in regards to my development flow, and also gives me a default sane file. For instance, if I now have a database called foo associated with this particular app, then typically my MS SQL creation script would be called foo.mssql.sql. Create, okay, here is a SQL Server create database script template for me, which I can immediately start editing as I see fit. If I do the same once more, but this time I choose MySQL, and then I rename my primary file to foo, then I get the MySQL equivalent, right? So this allows me to more easily understand the flow by applying intelligently template suggestions for what particular files I should normally be creating in this particular folder. You can of course turn off the so-called quote-unquote intelligent filtering, at which point you get every single template file that actually exists. For instance, if I now create a folder inside of my magic.startup called db-migrations, and then within this folder I create another folder called mssql, and then I also create, whoops, that became a file for some reasons. Let me create a folder, mssql. If I now I'm inside of this folder, I mark this as my active folder, then the template system is going to suggest a migration script for me, allowing me to create an MS SQL Server migration script that somehow modifies my database according to what type of new fields or indexes or foreign keys or etc. I do happen to need as I migrate existing databases to deploy my app and update it. So anyway, that was this video, and if you find this structure to be a little bit difficult to understand, then my suggestion for you is to install either Babelmail or Babel or Babelfish or whatever, and then have a look at the existing structure it actually has in regards to where does it have its HTTP endpoints, where does it create its dynamic slots, where does it create invoke the magic signal that actually creates the database, etc., etc. So anyways, that was it for now. Thank you for watching. There's a link in the description of this YouTube video to where you can download Magic. Have a nice day.